So just to remind you, Seana and I are the people building an online simulator to study what Baltus calls wisdom in action, which is how people make decisions in real time. I wanted to call it the Wizimulator, but she said Howard wouldn't like that, so we decided not to. And so our technical update is that the simulator is up and running online, and we have prepared our sample. We've identified our sample, and we'll collect data this summer on our feasibility study. This is our wisdom map, kind of faded out to show you the pieces that we'll be talking about. How do I work this? Just the big button? Good. So one of the greatest challenges that we faced while developing this simulator was in coming up with the wisdom equation, right? Or in other words, in order to do the analyses that we proposed, we need a mathematical expression of how much wisdom is in the system at any given time as a continuous variable, as a quantitative variable. So part of the confusion, though, that we faced back in January when we were working on this was we were really focused on the competence of the individual decision makers in the scenario. And we were calling that wisdom. Always uncomfortable with it because we knew that wasn't right, but we were calling it wisdom. Then we had this insight that that's really the attribution of the cause of wisdom, whereas the wisdom itself is an outcome or an effect. Okay? That was the insight. And so we realized that in addition to having this kind of attribution of what's causing the wisdom, we need two steps, not just one, in order to get to the wisdom. One is you assess some state of the world. This is measurement, right? And so, for example, in chess, John beats 70% of other chess players. That's just a statement of fact. It's neither good nor bad. It's neither wise nor unwise. It's that step we take when we say he's better than 70% of the other chess players. We slip into that evaluative or normative mode. And in that case, those two things are very well aligned. But in wisdom, they may not be. And so the insight for us was that the key insight was that the competency model is the cause of the wisdom, and what's in the yellow boxes here in terms of the situation in the world that's being driven, that's where the wisdom itself is.
So what's going on in the yellow boxes? Again, going back to our problem, how do we assess and evaluate wisdom? And so we went back to the wisdom literature, and in the literature we basically found 4 what we're calling symptoms of wise outcomes. First of all, we are incorporating the common good, and we are incorporating a sense of fairness or distributive justice. We are also linking individual outcomes to a shared fate. Again, we're all in this together, and we are balancing long-term sustainability with short-term gains or losses. Now, obviously, in this short time, we don't have the time to do a one-on-one correspondence between our equations and these symptoms, but we'd like to give you a flavor. So in the simulator, there are 2 players, and each of them and each round of play have to make a decision on how many factories to build in their country. This sets off a cascade of effects through a whole bunch of other equations that run the dynamics of the game that include things like the global oil supply, profit and loss for each country, and ultimately quality of life, which is at the end and kind of takes on the aggregates of all of the other effects. So we focused on that as the assessment. The measurement of what's going on in the world on which we're going to base what we're talking about with wisdom. Quality of life, in social psychology, there are some findings that suggest that it's not just what's going on with us, but it's also how we compare to some reference, what's going on with others. And so when we're a little bit better off, we get a boost, here 25%. And when we perceive that we're doing a little bit worse, then we get slammed, right? And here we have 75%. Okay, now we take this assessment of quality of life and we turn it into an evaluation where again we add, well, is this good or is this bad? And the wisdom evaluation has both long-term and short-term. So with the short-term, we do an average of the total quality of life, and this is where this disparity, this lack of distributive justice, if it occurs, really hurts on the average, the short-term. And then we have the long-term equation, which is where after the players have played for 6 rounds, we just run the simulator out until it hits a steady state, an equilibrium state. And that is added in. So by operationalizing wisdom in this way, using a simulator tool to collect data, and where it's independent of any characteristics of the people who are playing, again, anybody can come in and play this simulator, we can measure the causes, which is what Mike was talking about with, in our case, it's competency model, and the effects, which is what we're calling wisdom. And we can measure it with the simulator separately and concurrently so that we're trying to make things an empirical platform, to look at this empirically to better understand the relationship between psychological processes or behaviors that relate to wisdom without collapsing it into wisdom itself. That's what we're trying to do. The end. Thank you.